Hello, my dear audiences. Welcome to the show, Jack Zhao on East West Show with G&E TV. We did one show about the subject of the church shooting where 9 lives were taken in South Carolina. We are very mournful still about that tragedy. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. Yet, like I said many times, I still want to say one more time that let the news pass, we do not think that guy deserves any publicity. We're talking about the afterthoughts, not aftermath or whatever. Afterthoughts about the incident. There are lots of questions, lots of takes raised from different directions. And I start to see that fingers are being pointed. Well, I don't know that's right or wrong. I'm very confused. Now we have several things laid in front of us. Number one, in President Obama's speech the next morning, right after the incident, he mentioned about number one, of course, that's a hate crime based upon discrimination. Number two, he calls upon the wake-up call of gun control. And number three, which is right after we come across with the Confederate flag issue. And then there are this article talking about fingers are being pointed in one direction, trying to connect things together. Like I said, every time I have a crying baby, I turn myself to my trustworthy, source of information is so trustworthy that in spite of the long distance of driving, I still have to extend my invitation to have him to come over. With me is my good friend, a big friend, Mr. James Lee, former political consultant of both President George H.W. Bush and George Bush, 41 and 43. And later, he became the spokesman of former California Governor Pete Wilson. So, to you, Mr. Lee, welcome to the show.
Always good to be here, Jack.
All right, good. I'm so glad that you came over with the long driving in a condition like this morning. Yes, people are very confused. All right. To the 9 people who have lost their lives, we buried them in the greatest way we could. We paid as much mournful thoughts, and our thoughts were with the family as much as possible, as we could. Now that we're talking about the comments, right? So let's talk first about President Obama's statement, right, for the hate crime. Right, then we probably need to find out why there's a hate crime. So, you have a take on that, please?
Well, first of all, I think everyone recognizes that the shooting in Charlestown was an undeniable tragedy. It was an undeniable tragedy put upon those people by for lack of a better term, an evil person in Dylan Roof. I think the problem, though, is that anytime you inject race in any kind of national incident or national debate, the issue becomes extremely clouded. And it becomes confusing because you deal with issues of racial identity, you deal with issues of history, you deal with issues about motivation. I think that we've leapt to the conclusion that this guy acted out of racial animus towards African Americans because of his manifestos, the carrying the Confederate flag on his videos and the pictures and the posing and stuff like that. So the FBI and local law enforcement are going to go down that path, and we'll get a more complete answer as we kind of investigate this guy's background. The problem that we have right now is that, under President Obama, there was a lot of hope that there would be a bridging of the racial divide in America with the election of a first black president. I think we have discovered that in the past 6 years that race relations in America have not gotten better. They've actually gotten worse. And they've gotten worse because, prior to President Obama, I think race relations were going to a position where people understood that the path to racial equality was a path of economic equality, that your achievements were going to be merited based on the kind of job that you got, the kind of achievements that you made, and the merit that you got. You know, you have to think back, for example, in California, we eliminated racial quotas in university admissions. There was a big anti-affirmative action movement across the country where people wanted to be judged on what they could do, not the color of their skin.
All right. Okay.
I think the clock has gone backwards, where now we are so focused on skin color and we're so focused on race. And you know, to some extent, I think President Obama has contributed to this because he's taken every opportunity to inject himself into it.
Sure. What has Obama or Obama administration done to make the situation worse, or is it because President Obama himself being black, and you know, the controversy rising from the white getting stronger than usual?
Well,
how much do we want to weigh that?
I think you have to understand that, you know, the role of the President of the United States when it concerns, you know, issues like this, it should be one of a uniter, a conciliator, a mourner in chief, someone who brings the country together. We've seen in every case of his presidency when a racial issue has occurred, thinking back to the first year of his presidency, where he had the famous beer summit between the African American professor and the Boston police officer, you know, out on the lawn of the White House to talk about race. That was his very first effort to like dabble in this issue. Then, you know, you look at issues like Trayvon Martin, where he talked about how, you know, if he had a son, you know, he would think that he was Trayvon. And then moving on to this issue, at every single point, he's always injecting himself very early in the process before law enforcement's had a chance to go through it. And it's given the feeling of the nation that he's condemned law enforcement, for example, or condemned, you know, for lack of a better term, whites. And then, you know, the African American community, and not really the African American community as much as the specific agitators, people like Reverend Al Sharpton and so forth, have felt empowered and emboldened to basically, you know, stir up racial animus again. And I think, you know, instead of like talking in this particular instance about mental health, mental illness, guns, or other issues, instead, we're now focused on the Confederate battle flag, which frankly had nothing to do with this guy killing these people. But in fact, you know, if you really want to understand how to prevent situations like this, we better get our house in order in terms of our mental health problems.
There are two sayings. One saying that it's a war white on black, and the others call it the other way, say black on white. So is there a fake, or is there something of that nature?
I don't want to go down that path because, one, I think it's the language of progressives who want to go ahead and portray this as a racial inequality and racial battle in America. Let's understand something. The vast majority of police departments, for example, in America are all fully integrated. I mean, you have exceptions like Ferguson, which are small police departments, but all the major police departments now are all predominantly majority minority officers, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and so forth. So, you know, the vast majority of urban police associations are run by African American officers. You know, we have situations now where black achievement in the arts and economics and industry is really predominant now. So, you know, on any other objective measure that there's a significant growth and achievement of African American minorities in our community. Understand too that the fastest growing minority group in America is not African Americans or Latinos, it's Asians. So, you know, you have to ask yourself, you know, why do Asians not feel this type of racial animus, even though they're the fastest growing minority group in America?
Sure. From the point of Martin Luther King's time, Dr. Martin Luther King's time, to the point before Obama took position, has the issue of black and white conflict been subsiding down, or been improving, or remains the same till Obama makes it worse, in your opinion?
Well, I think that it really depends who you ask. If you ask, for example, typical progressives or Democrats, they'll tell you that race relations are still not good in America and that they've actually, you know, gotten worse, as evidenced by, in their case, their belief, you know, the attacks on police and so forth. Attacks by police. I think if you talk to a lot of Republicans, what they'll tell you is that a lot of the animosity and tension being felt in America right now between different ethnic groups is not a product of actual the economic situation of people. That's actually gotten better. What's gotten worse is our leadership, i.e. President Obama and other people like commentators on television and cable news, for example, who are leading the charge in the perception that there's something really wrong in America. And I think that there's a general unease that people have right now because I'm sure a lot of white people feel very put upon in terms of the perception that they're the source of all evil. A lot of African Americans are feeling put upon because I'm sure every time there's a police shooting, they feel that they're specifically targeted because they are black. So I think we have to get back to bringing people together instead of dividing people, and I think that's the role the president can fulfill. But it's a role he's chosen not to fulfill right now.
I see. All right, all right. Thanks to that analysis, that I start to have a feeling that a dollar is still a dollar. Okay. Now, with my good friend, Mr. James Lee, former consultant to President George Bush, the 41 and 43, and a former governor spokesman for Pete Wilson of California. So we're trying to shed his light with our audiences about what's going on with this country, so to get to the root of the problem, if there are any. So stay with us. We'll be right back, please.